got a great program for you guys today. We've got a special guest who will be joining us shortly. Just want to set the stage first. So as always, logistics. There's myself, David, who will be hosting. Any sound technology issues, Scott's helping us out behind the scenes. So if you do have any issues, just pop into the chat box and Scott will monitor that and help you out. We do record all of these sessions, so if you do have any issues or anything, you can always catch it on the recording. And some user tools up at the top. You have a little man there. You can raise your hand. You can agree, disagree, tell us to speed up, etc. There's the chat box, which will be there throughout, and of course we always accept applause. So to get started, our opening thought today is from Peter Senge regarding systems thinking model. And when we put together this session around facilitating, really kind of thinking about, what does that mean and what does that look like? And I really like Peter's approach to this because he thinks like a biologist, not a manager. And what he looks at is what are the organic factors that we can put in place that'll support that growth or that change that we're looking for. And that's going to be kind of the recurring theme throughout our session today. So I want to ask you, what is your definition of facilitation? So I'm going to get you to pop into the question box down the bottom there. And is anyone able to hear the speaker right now? Guiding a discussion, yes I can. Okay, good. So you guys can hear me, great. Yeah, so just pop into the bottom there and type in what is your definition of facilitation. Let's give it a few moments. So from Laura, guiding a discussion. Love it. Thank you, Laura. Absolutely. And that's going to be an important key piece here around guiding it. But when we talk about guiding it, I want you to think about guiding it from this perspective of content versus process. And I'm going to let that sit for a bit, and we'll come back to that. Cubicle, need to dial a number for the phone. Is there one? No. Rachel, we're doing all of our through the VoIP, so we don't do a dial-in. Okay, so you do need to use your computer speakers. Time management of a topic. Andrea, could you expand on that for me a little bit? I'm not really sure what you mean. Managing and directing the conversation, absolutely. Strategically leading a conversation without a set path, but with a set agenda, from Sarah, absolutely. And key piece there is not having that set agenda. Excuse me, without the set path, because we need to let things go where they need to go. Okay. What else do we have? Delegating the tasks, absolutely. Helping and supporting from Yvonne, yes, allowing that to occur. Collaborating, making things happen, guiding the conversation, directing the conversation. So again, we want to be cautious around directing it from a content perspective versus a process perspective. Right? Moving tasks in the conversation forward. Facilitation, being able to draw from the team with questions and guided discussion from Judy. And coordinating and directing the plan from Sylvia, absolutely. Just want to finish off with Elaine's here, asking the right question to help guide the conversation where you want it to go. Absolutely. So keeping things on track, making sure that folks are doing what they need, getting where they need to go. It's a huge piece around that facilitation piece. So here's my definition of facilitation. Enabling something to occur. Controlling the process but not the content, in effect being a process meister. So you want to be there to direct the process but allow the content to be where it is. So if you're truly doing facilitation, you're not putting your input in, you are really just allowing it to go where it needs to go. So where will you apply facilitation? So our second question today. So I'm just going to pop this open. Where would you apply facilitation? People a few moments to type. Oh, multiple attendees typing. I always love to see that. Meetings from Pamela, absolutely. When the solution is required and there's disagreement amongst the team, I love that answer, Laura. Yeah, because facilitation can not only help us get to the answer that we need, but it can also be a great tool for dealing with conflict and dealing with those issues. Learning and development initiatives from Dave, absolutely do this all the time. In situations where multiple points of view from Maria, yes, this is a fantastic thing. When we think of it in terms of project management, We're often in that position where we need to get those multiple points of views in and really, take into account all of our stakeholders. Process meetings for problem solution, absolutely. In needs assessments, project meetings, risk discussions, from Judy, all over the place, absolutely. Some meetings, stand-up meetings, shareholder meetings from Sharon. Conversation gets off track, absolutely, because we can use that to drag it back in. We're actually going to address that in a little bit more detail a little bit later, Marie, so I'm glad you brought that one up. Thank you. Risk identification, any sort of brainstorming, addressing contentious or difficult group with disagreement is anticipated. When a clear path has not yet been determined, bringing the group together, stakeholders to define the best plan. Love that answer, Sarah, absolutely. Yeah, so you guys got a very savvy group here today, so this is fantastic. I'm just going to reset. There we go. Okay. So here's my answer. Everywhere. We use this all over the place. We use it in meetings. We use it in stakeholder identification, risk management, all kinds of places in managing projects. And we do see it throughout PMBOK. It's referenced quite a lot as a major skill, and I think it's one that we can really do a lot of good with, and really expand our game as project managers. Now, the concept of the golden nugget, this is something I came up with when I was teaching facilitation at Schulich. And this was for learning and development facilitation, but I thought it's really applicable here. And we're thinking about a definition and how can we sort of position facilitation, and I thought about the golden nugget, the wisdom. Where's the wisdom in the room? Now, in a presentation model, it's in the center, right? So presentation, the information is flowing from the center on out, as where in facilitation, it's really around the room. So when you ask where that golden nugget is, where the wisdom is, it's in one place, in the center when we're doing presentation. So when we deliver, when we teach, when we drive, we're really doing it from the center. But if we think about it from a facilitation model, the golden nugget is around the entire room. And this is kind of what's behind that Lao Tzu quote of, when the job is done, the people will say, oh, look, we did it ourselves. And this is really the sign of a great leader, because they're standing in the background and they're letting the team do the work. And this is really the essence of facilitation, that we're leveraging the people in the room as opposed to ourselves and directing it. Thinking about some of the advantages here. First one is engagement. Number one question I get, how do we get buy-in? Well, my take on that is, don't look for buy-in, look for join-in. Get people participating. And when you facilitate, people are participating. The other advantage is the full story. We avoid those surprises. We're getting the multiple life experiences, not just one. And then there's an innovation piece. Let's dig into these just a little bit. When we talk in terms of engagement, it's about what's in it for me, WIIFM. And we've talked about this in previous webinars. But really, when you start using facilitation and people start talking, you hear what's in it for them. You find out what is there with them. What is their thing that's going to tune them in. The full story, we need to be hearing from our stakeholders. Even the ones that we can't do anything about, we need to be talking to them. We need to be hearing from them so that we know where they're positioned, what's going on, and how best we can facilitate them. The multiple life experiences. The team is always stronger than the individual. And the more we can be a facilitator in the middle of that crowd, helping direct and getting everyone in place, the more we can be more effective as managers of our project. And finally, innovation. Now, I've shared this story before on some of my previous webinars. I had the great benefit of being on the Aerovelo team when we built and flew the world's first and only human-powered ornithopter. And here's why I brought this in today. The two gentlemen who ran this project, Cam and Todd, one's a master's in aeronautical engineering and one's a PhD. But they really ran their projects very much from a facilitated perspective. And what this led to was what they refer to as their hingeless moment. So this is their aha moment that enabled them to do this. Now, while they were running the project, they were trying to figure out how do they make a flapping wing airplane light enough for a human to power it. And the moment was when they got rid of the hinges. So when you ask this question, how do you build a human-powered ornithopter? The answer is get rid of the hinges. Now, how does this tie in with facilitation? It was a first-year co-op student from France who came up with this. And it was partly a language barrier, but it was also partly he didn't have the years of experience and the years of training that locked them into something that wasn't going to work. So they were trying to figure this out. Now, if they had been doing this on that central nugget model, where they were the experts and they were telling the team what to do, aka presentation, instead of facilitation, they never would have received that message. So just to show you what this looks like, here is the ornithopter in flight. Okay, so the way that worked was they used flexibility of materials. And this was the big aha for them, because when you have a hinge, it focuses all kinds of energies and stresses, and you need to make a big, strong, heavy thing that won't fly. And this was their big aha moment, but it was facilitation that allowed them to get there. So I mentioned today that we're going to have a special guest. So I want to introduce a good friend of mine, Susan Gesner. Now, I've asked Susan to join us today. Hi, Susan. Come on in. David. So Susan has 25 years of experience facilitating and a really neat set of qualifications. Combined honors in biology and geography, Bachelor of Education, and a master's in environmental science. So she's worked in as a biologist in the field for most of her for many years, and most of her facilitations in the environmental setting. So she's been able to use her experience to leverage that within the facilitation field. But here's the most important thing: is Susan loves doing this work. There's a great passion here for this, and she loves connecting people and helping them see things in a different world, and really making those connections and doing that innovation. So. And there's Susan in a more natural context. So Susan's actually a neighbor, and we often go hiking together. So, Susan, with all your experience, I want to ask you, what are some of your tricks of the trade? So, how do you deal with disengagement?
I'm going to be honest, David, because maybe it's my years of facilitation, but I often don't have to deal with disengagement because I prevent it. I prevent it happening before it starts. I have 3 tricks that I use to deal with disengagement. And the first, when I'm facilitating a large meeting, and that can be anywhere from 20 people to 100 people, the first thing I do before I walk into the room is find out what makes those people tick. What's most important to them? What are their hot buttons? What are they concerned about? What are they going to come to that meeting or that presentation being anxious about? And I want to know that ahead of time. So throughout whatever I'm doing, whatever my facilitation is, I'm going to have those things in the back of my mind. Okay. The second thing I do, when I get a group of those people together, think about how busy you are every day in your work life. Trying to get a room full of people together, trying to schedule something is ridiculous. So the opportunities to get people together really are quite precious. And so when I stand in front of a group of people to facilitate discussions, I use that kind of language. I talk about how precious this time is, how unique it is for this mix of people to be in a room together. And I remind everybody that it is precious. So every moment that we disengage, anybody disengages, we're losing some of that value. So those are the two things to start with. And then the third thing that I do whenever I facilitate a meeting, regardless of what kind of meeting it is, I make a human connection, not just from me as the facilitator to the group, but from everybody in the group to one another. And I'll give you, I think we have time for me to give you an example. I just ran a workshop. I had about 50 people at the Royal Botanical Gardens, and we were looking at how to increase protected areas in Ontario. So there are people from government, there's people from private industry, there are people from non-government organizations, all very passionate and with disparate views about the value of protected areas. So I knew there was going to be some concerns. I also knew it was a long day and people might not really want to focus the whole time. So I asked them 3 questions. 3 is my magic number. I asked them to introduce themselves in terms of what is their name, what do they do, not what their job is, what do they do, and then finally tell me something that is not on your CV. So that's easy. So I started and I said, my name is Susan Gesner. I help people make decisions and I help groups work together. And something that is not on my CV is that I am a Cape Breton style fiddler. And then the next person, I challenged the next person to answer those same 3 questions, but they had to, at the end of it, make a connection to me. So Niall Lobley spoke, and he told me who he was, he told me what he did, and he told me, oh, and I'm from Scotland, where everybody plays the fiddle. By the end of going through those 50 people, and I gave them a time limit, suddenly everybody had connected with one another. It wasn't well, we're here to talk about protected areas. It was, oh, my grandmother is from that same town, and oh, you know, I play that instrument, or oh, this is what I do in my spare time. So from the very beginning of this session, everybody was engaged with one another. I re-emphasized throughout the session how precious that time is. And people stay engaged because they're not just engaged with David Donaldson, the change management, project management facilitation specialist. They're engaged with David Donaldson, who does that. Oh, and then he hikes too. So that's a big thing for me to prevent disengagement from the beginning.
Nice. So it sounds like you're taking a very proactive approach, right? Yeah. And 3 things that I took out of that, your three major ones. Know your audience ahead of time so you can prepare and really be there for them. Their time is precious, yes. Right? So let's honor that. And then finally create those human connections, right? And I wrestle with this a lot because, of course, we're doing our classes and we've got, one day and there's a lot of content and we're constantly being pressured to, fit in more with less. And so what ends up happening is people think, oh, well, I'll start taking things out. Let's take away those annoying introductions that are of no real value. But, I've experimented with this and, oh, my goodness, it's such a different group because we put a bunch of people in the room and we have a bunch of people in the room, right? Yeah. You do something like that and you're now starting to build a team. You're starting to create those connections. And especially in your work, because you deal with a lot of contention.
Yes,
right?
Very much so.
When you say there's 50 people in the room, you've got people representing various different stakeholder groups, right? So often with different priorities and agendas, and sometimes with some history too.
50 different opinions. And the opinions are all about a particular topic. So if you can connect those people, that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely.
I call it the underrated value of introductions.
Underrated value of introductions. I like that. Might steal that. Yeah. All right. Our next trick. How do you deal with disruption?
That's such a good story to tell you about this too. I'll tell you the disruption, and then I'll tell you how I dealt with it.
Fantastic.
I was running a workshop last winter being important to know too, for Department of Fisheries and Oceans down at the center in Burlington, right on the lake. Okay? So I had about 40 different scientists in the room, and we were talking about beneficial use impairments, BUIs. The idea was, by the end of the day, we needed to have a comprehensive list of these BUIs. So we're on the 3rd floor of this building, it's winter, it's cold, and we have a fire drill. And like you said, we had one day to make things happen. Okay, but let me tell you generally how I deal with disruption, and then I'll explain what I did in that session. And the only way you can deal with disruption is plan, prepare, and be creative. So whenever I'm walking into a meeting or facilitating a session or anything like that, I think, what can go wrong? Okay, the bulb in my projector is going to blow. I'm going to lose my computer power. All my notes are gone. So what else can go wrong? And I literally walk through a list of things that can go wrong. and then I prepare. Some things I prepare physically. I bring extra computer or projector bulbs. I make sure all my notes are on a memory stick. There's things you can do. And then the third thing is I try and be creative as possible. So you plan for things to go wrong, you prepare, and then in my mind, I think, well, what could I do if? How could I, if all the power in the room goes down and all my beautiful slide decks are gone, what can I do with a magic marker and a flip chart kind of thing? So disruption happens. So it's the planning that is critical. In this situation, it had nothing to do with planning, really, although I was prepared for something foolish. It was creativity that had to take over. So the alarm goes off. We're all in this room on the 3rd floor. During a fire drill, it was actually a fire. It ended up actually being a fire, but the smoke alarms went off. You watch people pick up their cell phones and whatever bags they can and sprint out the door. And I'm yelling, take a pen, because I think I've got to be able to take that time when we're outside. So I grab up some paper and pens, and I'm going down the stairs going, oh, this is useless. Nobody's going to want to take their mittens off. Because I still had to get those beneficial use impairments done. So by the time I got outside, I went, oh, well, wait a minute. There are a whole lot of other scientists out here from the building. We could actually go around and interview all these other scientists and get their input. So some people did bring paper and pencil, but everybody had their cell phone, and most cell phones have a record button on it. So I had this light bulb say, go around and interview and record and see how many you can get done in, we'll give it 15 minutes.
Yeah.
We were outside for 20 minutes. It was very cold, but we got a lot of stuff done, and everybody thought that I had planned this. So
what I'm hearing is we should pull the fire alarm in the middle of our session. I was wondering if it was an actual fire or a drill.
Yeah, it was the smoke alarms had gone off, and so you have to wait till the fire guys get there, right? So that was really quite entertaining. But we were able to go back in.
So I've had 2 times when we've had an actual fire like happen. The first time, it was actually a false alarm, because what had happened was it was a new fire system that had been put in, and the humidity. It was in July, and it was in Manitoba, and it was just like dripping. Yeah, you couldn't breathe, humidity, and that triggered the fire alarms. And this was at Atomic Energy of Canada, so this is an active nuclear site. So of course they've got their own on-site fire and their own on-site security. So that just went through the roof, and we got evacuated. And an hour or so later, we're back in, and what happens 20 minutes later, right? Kicks off again. So yeah, good fun. So fantastic. So that preparation, and this is something that I struggle with from my personality perspective, because I'm a kind of shoot from the hip type of personality. So I have to discipline myself to make sure that I have that preparation, but I found that preparation really helps when the disruption occurs, because you've got stuff to draw on, you've got tools to draw on. And in the world of project management, I mean, this is risk management 101, right? This is just basic risk management. Let's let's anticipate what we can. Let's put together those plans, and then of course when something does go off the rails, we get a little creative, and we have to retain that flexibility. So fantastic points, thank you. All right, our next one, let me steer. So we're in the middle of our session, we're doing whatever it is we're doing in a facilitated group, and we've got the know-it-all, the expert who wants to take control, who wants to run the show. And I had this happen yesterday. I was teaching a class, and we've broken into this exercise, and there was 5 groups, and they're all doing their exercise. And one group grabs the rolling flip chart and wheels it over to their desk to do the exercise on the flip chart instead of on the paper, which is great. I'm just like, hey, this is awesome. Yeah. But then after about 5 minutes of that, he turns the thing and turns it to the entire class and starts bringing all of the other groups in and tries to facilitate this whole discussion amongst all of the teams. So it was an interesting take on the approach to this exercise. So what's your solutions to the folks who want to take control?
Again, I do a lot in preparation. So when you're a facilitator, not necessarily a project manager, when you're a formal facilitator, you have the luxury of steering the way you want things to go, allowing for creativity and input, but steering it. I like to set ground rules, and I know in the study of facilitation, there's mixed opinions about ground rules. I like ground rules.
Okay.
They work for me. Like the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, they're more like guidelines. But I like to have them out there,
yep.
And I'm very clear about some of them. I mean, we work together as a group to set some, but there's some that I'm very clear about. And one of the guidelines rules that I'm clear about is listen first. So I ask everybody to listen with a critical ear and then respond. That's my first one. And my second one is, well, one of the many is, I want you to contribute and not dominate. Okay? So when I'm running a meeting or facilitating a meeting, those rule guidelines would be on the wall behind me or somewhere within the room. And I make a point of referring to them throughout my session. Yep, I love what you've just said, Jody. You've contributed a unique idea. You haven't dominated the discussion, but it's been good. We're all listening. That's valuable. So last winter, I ran a workshop up in Parry Sound for the Sustainable Forest License people and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. They're looking at renewing their forest management plan and coming up with desired forests and benefits. So, as you said earlier, I had a whole variety of stakeholders in the room, government people, non-government people, and the issue really that everybody was concerned about was road access. And everybody contributed, most everybody listened. At one point, Buddy gets up and he starts to talk about road access and literally does one of these like everybody. And he just keeps talking. And I'm up at the front and I thought, well, this is interesting. How do I stop him? Because he just kept going. So I did a couple things. One is, in my facilitation, I move around a lot. So I just walked over and I stood next to him. And I listened very intently. And I always have a little book, and I was listening to him and writing notes and listening. And I wasn't, too close that it made him feel creepy, but just I'm paying very close attention. Mm-hmm. And everybody else in the room knows I'm paying close attention. And when he paused for a moment, I said, okay, Buddy, that wasn't his name, but Dave or John or whatever he was. What I want to do now is reiterate what you've just said. Mm-hmm. And so I captured some of his concerns. I didn't ask him for affirmation. Simply I said, those are your concerns. And then I opened it up to the rest of the group. Okay, we've heard from Joe or Harry or Buddy, and that's one perspective that's valuable. Let's see what else we can gather. So I used myself. Mm-hmm. I moved myself over to him so that he had to deal with me in some capacity. I recaptured his words, so I validated what he had to say. Yes, that's valuable, that's important. And then I redirected by opening it back up to the group.
Beautiful, love it. Excellent example, thank you. Use of physical space when you facilitate is I think, highly underrated. So when I set up my rooms, I always make sure that I set up the room in a way that's going to support what we're about to do. So, for example, yesterday's session there was group work, right? And people were working in pods, so we set them up in pods. But I also, when I set them up in pods, I don't do the square grid thing. Yeah. I angle it so that it's kind of like a fan, and it kind of fans out from the center like this, as opposed to, lines. And I find that subtle difference really makes a difference, because people seem to, when they're in the square box lines, it's like, okay, I need to stay inside the lines. But if it's kind of angled a little bit askew, okay, it's a little bit more relaxed. And it I don't know, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it seems to work for me. The other thing that I love what you did is the ground rules. I'm a big fan of this. And years ago, I learned a technique for this called the working agreement. And the working agreement is this. You start out with a blank piece of paper, on the flip chart or the whiteboard. And you say, working agreement. These are, and you introduce this, we're going to do a quick we're going to build our working agreements. But you're going to write them. So I get the class to write them, right? I get the group to write them. Now, I have a couple that have to be there, for sure.
Like mine.
Exactly, but guess what? They always put them there. I've never yet, and I've been doing this I've been teaching for about 25 years. I on and off would do the ground rules thing depending upon the group, and I kept the working agreement only for the special cases. When I knew it was going to be a problem, and I thought, why keep the good china for only guests? Let's bring it out every time. So I now do it for every class. I've been doing this for every class now for about 3 years.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. And I've yet to miss one of my key elements. It just, everyone knows this. This isn't rocket science, folks. Yeah. They know this. But the thing that I found is when they're the ones putting it up, they live it. Yeah. Right? Absolutely. And when you call them on it, if you have to, because occasionally you have to. And the way I position it always is it's an agreement. We agree that this is how we're going to work. I'm going to hold you accountable, but you're also going to hold me accountable. Mm-hmm. Right? You're going to hold me accountable. And if there is something that comes out. So one of my key elements, and I just noticed Laura's put up here, tell us what those key elements are. So one of my key elements is devices. Right? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I always like to say, give us the best present you have, which is your presence. So phones off, computers off, that kind of thing. Now, of course, if they're going to be used in a session for something, for some reason, then okay, they're going to be allowed. But in general, we're here to interact with each other as opposed to, be on our devices.
It's that precious time I talk
about. It is that precious time, and I love that language. So that's one of the key ones. Another key one, and you touched on this, is listen with the critical ear. So, accept other people, and it usually comes out as respect. Right? I often get people say respect. So it's like, okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? How do we live that here in the room? And one of that is, of course, making space for people to talk. Mm-hmm. Right? So, often people say well, don't talk over other people, right? Except there's no stupid questions, there's no dumb ideas. It's like, agreed, but we also want to apply a critical eye to that and say, let's challenge that. Because if you're going to show me respect, and I say something that doesn't land for you, and you say, yeah, Dave, good one, that's not respect. No, that's no. If it's not working for you, I need you to come back on that. So want to address Laura's, what are some of those key elements? For me, devices is a big one. Mm-hmm. Being here and being present. Mm-hmm. What's some of your key ones?
I do a lot of work with Indigenous people. Okay. And facilitating with different cultures and different societies. It's important, I find, for me to understand what is important to them. Mm-hmm. With Indigenous people, often I find, in my experience, you need to give them and everybody time to process information.
Absolutely.
So we talk about listen with the critical ear, but also pause. So in that is another ground rule that's important. You need to pause and give people time to think about what the words mean. And that's one of the big things that working with Indigenous people has taught me, to pause.
So I'm going to invite our audience out there, if anyone has a particular key element that they feel is important to have on their working agreement ground rules, go ahead and type them in. Another one for me is fun.
Oh, yeah.
You got to have fun. It's interesting because we look at how the human brain works and we move towards things that we like, and we like having fun, right? So when you go into that meeting and it's like, oh my God, yeah. Right? Talk about instant disengagement, right? But if you make it a little bit of fun, and that's like your opening, right? Yeah. It's like, what do you do for fun? What do you do outside of work?
Yeah.
What makes you, right? And, we kind of bring some of that in so that it becomes inviting. 5 times a second, our brain is saying, do I move towards this? Do I move away? Yeah. Hey, here's an idea. Let's create that environment that invites people in, right? Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so from Reg, no hidden agendas. Leave interpersonal baggage at the door. I love it. So I'm hoping you check that baggage, Reg, and give them a tag so they can get their baggage back at the end. From Pamela, make sure to build in a physical and mental breaks. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that really builds on what you're saying about time to process.
Yeah.
So oftentimes we've had the time to think it through and plan it, and especially for me when I'm teaching a class that I've taught 100 times.
It's in your head already.
I can tell you the page numbers, right? And here's this complex concept that I can walk through super fast. And now it's like, okay, give me a minute to process that. Absolutely. And that also plays a bit to the different personality types. So people who are, a little bit more introverted take more time to process. People who are more detail-oriented, I'm not. I'm one of those big sky people. So, I'll hit the surface of it and move on. I'm good. Right? But you get other people.
They want
they want every little number. And until all those numbers are lined up, they're not going to be too happy. So, some excellent points there. I see Dave is typing, so we'll give him a few seconds. There we go. Ooh, safe environment. Oh, yes. Yeah. Good one, Dave. Very, very key. Yeah.
Dave, that's interesting, because one of the things I always say when I run a meeting, especially if it's a big meeting, you walk in the room, the door closes, and this is now all of us. The energy is here. It's kind of like what goes on in Vegas. But what goes on in here is a good, safe, and creative place to be, and you don't have to worry about anything like that.
I get the Vegas analogy a lot when we do the working agreement. And as I like to say, yes, we want to live that, but from a confidentiality perspective, we want the lessons to come out. We want the names to stay. Absolutely.
Exactly. Another thing I do also try and do is I try and start on time. Always start on time and end before. So I'll tell the group we're running from 9 to 4, and I want to be done by 3:45 at the latest. I want to have it all so people can go, oh, hey, that's great. And I usually tell people that. That's part of the ground rules. I'm going to drive you. I'm going to push you, because we're going to get out of here before we need to.
Nice. Give everyone the opportunity to express. Absolutely. And I think that's really at the core of facilitation, right? We need to give people that space. So hence, when we have the let me steer trying to take over, very important that we have to intervene on that, right? And there's good subtle ways of doing it. I love your use of physical location, right? I mean, you don't get in their face, but you get a little bit, absolutely. Create a collaborative environment. And you know what, Sharon, that is fantastic, but I want to really highlight that first word, create, because we are running the room. It is our space. We need to take control of that. We need to create that. And when I get into this conversation, especially in a training context, think of those courses you've walked in, and there's the instructor sitting down on their laptop doing something. You walk in and you look around and you go, am I in the right place? Right? So you walk over to them and say, hi, I'm Dave, I'm here for and they're like annoyed. It's like, oh, okay, great, I so want to be here right now. I always make a point, and again, this is the prepare piece, right? Get there early, get things set up. A normal day for me, and I say normal because once in a while it doesn't work, right? A normal day for me is everything is already set up before that first student walks in. So I'm free to be up walking around greeting people. I make a point of greeting everyone individually as they walk in. That helps create that collaborative environment, right? It makes it welcoming and discussing.
One more thing I want to add to that, David, because I thought that was very interesting. The ground rules we talk about, one of the ground rules I also try and ensure gets included is the fact that everybody's going to participate. So, Sharon, as you said, create that collaborative environment. My expectation is that everybody in the room has a voice, and everybody's going to participate. Now, there are different personalities, and some people are this person, and some people are this person. So I tell people, I'm going to want to hear from everybody. Everybody has a voice here. So even if you're quiet, I'm going to at least turn to you to look for your input. So be prepared for that, and be prepared to input any way that you feel comfortable.
So when you say anywhere you feel comfortable, what are some of the options?
Well, you can do this. You can pull me to the side and provide something to me.
So have like a private conversation.
Exactly. That I can then share with the rest of the group. You can write something on a piece of paper and give it to me. You can tell me at coffee, Susan, I'm really not comfortable talking in front of a group, and they give me their input. So what I want to do is create a feeling in the room where everybody knows, A, that their input is wanted and valued, and that they can give it to me and input any way they feel comfortable.
Nice, excellent. And really key there around the whole, your input is wanted, right? Because, I mean, we've all been in those sessions where it's like, oh yeah, we want you to give your input, and then they kind of shut down the door. right? They don't really provide the vehicle, or when it is provided, they're annoyed. This kind of thing, how it's reacted to. I'm a huge fan of having the spare Post-it notes kicking around.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you get the large format Post-it notes, you put them there, you encourage people to write on it. I encourage people to come up and write on the boards, setting that up and creating it in different environments. Another vehicle that I've used to a lot of success is the small groups.
Oh, it's all, yeah.
Yeah, because now you get the group of 5 people, and you've got the one extrovert in the group and the 4 introverts, and they're all good to talk within the group of 5, and then that extrovert can stand up and deliver on their behalf, and it's so much fun to watch these groups do this, because you'll see the person going, yeah, you talk, I'm okay over here, but they've had the chance to have their input, and you can see that they feel very comfortable that their input has been received and validated, but they didn't have to get up and stand up and talk.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So some fantastic stuff, and it almost felt like we were going off track there a little bit. So this is very, well placed. So one of the biggest fears of facilitation, especially for people who are new at this, or struggling with that feeling of lack of control, because there's still a lot of control there. How do we deal with it when it goes off track?
Okay. Well, let me give you an example. You made me think of it then when you talked about the small group, about where things went horribly. Not as bad as a fire drill, but just off track. So I had 6 groups, 6 small groups running, because whenever possible, I like to mix large and small groups when I'm facilitating, for all the reasons that you spoke about. The large group because it gives this group energy, and small group because it gives everybody a voice. So I had 6 groups. For whatever reason, I had 5 of them in one room, and that there weren't enough tables. So
right.
this
one
other
group's in a room, yeah.
Big mistake. Okay? Big mistake. So I have he's not really a co-facilitator. He was an individual who was helping me run the project, and he said, don't worry, I'll go with the other group, and I'll get them started. So each group had a series of questions they had to answer. They were very specific, outcome-oriented questions. So I introduced them all. Everybody knows what to do. 5 groups in my room get started. I go to the other room and set the scene for this group again, and then I leave and go back to my room. And it was about an hour, and I'm bouncing from group to group, and I'm looking at my watch going, I thought he would come back and prep me. There was about 10 minutes left to the session. So I go into the other room, and I look on the wall where their flip chart is, and the guy that works with me, he's in the back like this, and not facilitating or steering at all. And what's on the flip chart has no relation whatsoever to their questions. None. They're completely off track. So this is a massive off track. So I pause, I breathe. I don't get upset with the guy in front of anybody. And I just went, whoa, okay, here we are. What's going on? How have you guys done with your questions? And they all kind of looked at me like, we got really focused on something else that had to do with private land. And I said, you now have 5 minutes. That's all you've got. And I grabbed the marker. I said, we're going to answer those questions because the brain power is in this room and you can do it. The other 5 groups, they needed 55 minutes. You guys, 5 minutes. Boom. And they just, like that. So, I mean, that's a massive off track, and it was sort of out of my control. But the thing that was interesting for me was that giving them a time limit was very useful. It focused them. So normally in a session where they go like this in the other direction, I would use a technique much like the let me steer. I might move myself over around the room to where a speaker or a group is going off track, and then I would redirect as I did with the let me steer, and then I would give a time limit, because with a time limit we all then focus. We know there's a purpose and we can focus, and that usually brings us way back on track fast.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah, so it sounded like you almost gave them a challenge to rise to.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah, for me, the getting off track piece, again, we go back to that preparation, we go back to the what's in it for me, but also, what's the objective? Why are we here?
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Why are we here? And we all need to be really clear on that. So that's something that I always start all my sessions with is like, why are we even here? What's our purpose? What's our objective? One of the sessions that I do is a 5-day very technical thing.
Yeah.
And it's for the PMP exam prep. And I have this magic phrase for the exam.
Yeah. Yeah.
and you see the 20 sets of ears in the room go, hello. And it's interesting because we go off on some side tangents, and we allow that to happen a little bit because of course there's some gold to be harvested, right? To be mined there. But of course we need to be aware and keep it on track. So we have our constraints, and great example there where you got that constraint of time, right? Now in my 5-day, we've got 5 full 8-hour days. Each one of those, the little ones, adds up, and we have 6 opportunities to be late, just coming back, right? So when we talk about the process is here's when we're going to start, here's where we're going to finish, and those sorts of things. So if we don't be strict on that, you can imagine 6 times 5. Even if it's just a few minutes per, we've lost a half a day at the end of our 5 days, right? And like you say, this time is very precious. It's hard to get, so let's honor it and let's really work on that.
When a group, we talked about preparation and how you prepare, how you get to know your group ahead of time.
Yes.
If I'm asked to facilitate a meeting, I will go to the client or whoever I'm working for, and I will say, at the end of the day, literally 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, what do you want to walk away with? What can I what can I push us towards? What do you need to have? So I get the outcomes, and I ask them, that's their challenge. They have to articulate it for me so that I know what those outcomes need to be. And when I start a meeting, I say, this is the direction we're going in. These are our outcomes. This is what we're trying to achieve. So going back to the beneficial use impairment session with the fire alarm, I knew exactly what we needed to achieve. We had so much time. When we came back in the room after with our recordings and that sort of thing, we could look at what our outcomes were, because the outcomes were on the wall as well, and say, okay, now we have that direction. Now we know what we're trying to achieve. So in a meeting, if we do go off track, it's not always bad, because there's opportunities for new and different thinking and all that sort of stuff. But if there's a time constraint, I'm going to bring them back because they all know what the outcomes are. I've written them here on the wall. Right. So you're going off track. Whoa. This is where we need to go. This is what we need to achieve. So it's important to make sure everybody in the room knows this is what we're striving for.
Absolutely. And know and recognize those constraints. But we also we get into the balancing act of making sure we have enough time to get what we need to get done. Because of course, especially in the world of projects, we're under such time constraints. We're under such time, money, resource constraints that oftentimes we're asked to do ridiculous things that can't be done within those time limits. But I also want to just reiterate, when we're talking about going off track, it's about process, it's not data. So when you're looking at those outcomes, this is not you want a yes decision. No, this is you want a decision. And whether that's a yes or no, if you've come to the decision, although you may not personally agree with it, you've been successful in your job as a facilitator. Because your job as a facilitator is to get the team to that consensus, to that decision, to that outcome, not to direct the content. And this is what we were talking about earlier with the process meister versus the content. So if you are there directing, the data, no, you're not being a facilitator, you're a contributor. If you're there getting the data out and harvesting it, that's why I like the term the golden nugget, because you're mining for that data. And it's in the heads, the brains, the life experiences of all those people around you.
You are the tool for all those people.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So, again, back to our opening thought, looking at Peter Senge's work around systems thinking model, he professes, think like a biologist, not a manager. Think about what can you do from an organic factors perspective. You know, you want to set the stage so that it grows on its own. So how do you support that growth? How do you enable that? How do you create the garden to allow, you know, the plants to flourish so that you can then harvest what it is you need? So thanks everyone. There's our code for the session, and our next session is coming up. I think it's it's in April. It's the first Friday in April. And we're going to be starting a whole new series on PM as a driver of change. So we're going to look for some really fabulous stuff there. So thanks so much. As always, we'll follow up with an email and give you the recording so that you can catch the session if you missed it and share it with your friends.